Ladies and gentlemen of the Action Army, what is going on, and welcome to another episode of Answers for Athletes. In today's video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Nordic curls, hip thrusts, and power cleans. But before I do that, make sure that you comment JUMP, J-U-M-P, down below in the comment section for a free bodyweight vertical jump training program. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your question down below if you want me to answer your question in a video just like this. So recently, I posted a video titled The Top 7 Best Exercises for Vertical Jump. And it actually should have been titled, If I Could Only Do 7 Exercises for Vertical Jump, What Would They Be? Because they're technically not the top 7, but they were max approach jumps, sprints, single leg hops, back squat, rear foot elevated split squat, barbell RDLs, and standing calf raises. So these aren't essentially the 7 best exercises, but if I could only do 7, that gets me a unilateral, very intensive plyo, sprints, best plyo that you could do, best for velocity by far, max approach jumps, going to be the best for jumping in general. The best exercise that you could possibly do is practice the skill that we're trying to improve. Then we have a squat, a hinge, and a calf raise, and then rear foot elevated split squat is just going to be a unilateral strength squat pattern that's going to be very good. So not necessarily the 7 best, but if I could only do 7, that covers pretty much all of my bases. And in that video, I said, leave your top 7 down below in the comment section, and I will review your top 7. So we got one of those, and then we got a bunch of questions. What about this exercise? What about that exercise? A couple of which were Nordic curls, hip thrusts, and power clean. So I'm going to go through these right now and tell you what I think about all of these various exercises that all of you are wondering about. So someone commented their top 7 would be running and jumping. So a max approach jump. Yes, definitely top 7. Power cleans, definitely up there, could be considered a top 7. RDLs, yes. Squats, depth jumps, definitely was almost in my top 7. Didn't make it, but it was, if I didn't have single leg hops, it was going to be depth jumps. And then single leg max jumps over a hurdle. So single leg jumping over a hurdle, highly, highly underrated. You guys know how I feel about exercises where you have to transfer horizontal momentum into vertical. Super underrated exercise. Would it make it in my top 7? Probably not, but definitely a great thing for you to do. Next comment we got was, what about seated single leg box jumps with weight? Also, would box squats be better than a back squat? So let me break these into 2 different questions. Seated single leg box jumps with weight, I'm not a fan, right? So you can do that, but let's think about it. Seated box jumps, you are going to be already moving slower than, what did I say? Seated box jumps. Okay, so let's just think about regular seated box jumps, double leg seated box jumps. You are going to be moving a little bit slower than regular vertical jumps, a standing vertical jump, because we are taking out the eccentric in the amortization phase. So it is just purely a concentric. So it's already going to be moving slower than if we had the eccentric and concentric. So then we're doing it on one leg, single leg box jumps. Now it's even slower. Then we are adding weight. Now it's even slower. So we're just moving really, really slow. And the point of a seated box jump is starting strength, is concentric force production and power. Like, we are breaking up the eccentric and the concentric for a reason, and we want to move that concentric. We want to get off the ground as fast as we possibly can, concentric only. So if you're doing single leg and then you're adding weight, it's just going to be super slow, in my opinion. Then your next question, are box squats better than back squat? They're just different. The point of a box squat is, the main point is to break up the eccentric and the concentric, right? So a lot of people do box squats, not necessarily wrong. If you're just using a box to get down to depth and then explode back up, that's something that some people do. That's something that I do a lot. It's just a make sure that you reach this depth. But The point is to break up the eccentric, go down, sit on the box, pause for half a second, and then explode up, right? We are breaking up the eccentric portion and the concentric portion. So similar to a seated box jump, box squats are really focusing on that concentric power. So that's actually a good pair if you're going to pair up some contrast training. That's not a bad thing to do, is to pair box squats with seated box jumps. Next question, what can you about hip thrusts? I like hip thrusts a lot. I would say that definitely crossed my mind for my post-chain exercise in my top 7. So I chose barbell RDLs instead. I like RDLs a little bit better. But there comes a point in RDLs where if you get really heavy on them, the grip strength becomes the limiting factor. So then you use a mixed grip, the way that you do a deadlift instead of an overhand grip, use a mixed grip, and that helps with RDLs a little bit for you to stay heavy. But with hip thrust, you can go a lot heavier than you can with RDLs. So I'm not mad at hip thrusts at all. Personally, I've never seen it really. I've never noticed it transform my vertical jump or the athletes that I coach that much, but I also haven't used it that much, so I can't really say that. So if I had to choose post-chain exercises that I would do, I would say that hip thrust would be second, right? So in those 7 exercises, I'm going to always do max approach jumps. I'm going to always do my sprints, single leg hops. But then when it comes to my squat, hinge, calf raise, we're going to do our calf raises. We're going to do our squat pattern. So that's a back squat or a rear foot elevated split squat. For a post-chain movement, if you're not going to do barbell RDLs, you could put deadlifts in there. Going to be, people forget that deadlifts are a hinge. We think deadlifts and squats, they're like super similar. One is a squat pattern. Deadlifts are supposed to be a hinge pattern. Trap bar deadlifts, a little bit more similar to a squat. But you could be doing deadlifts, but I think I would put hip thrusts above deadlifts just because it is a little bit more focused on post-chain, whereas deadlifts is going to be just post-chain, anterior chain. It's just, that's why they call it the king of all exercises, because it really is just that much of a compound lift where you are using all of the muscles in your lower body, essentially. But I don't want to keep yapping about this, but hip thrust is very good. I would probably put that right behind barbell RDLs for what I would do. So if I didn't do barbell RDLs in my top 7, I would likely do hip thrusts. Thoughts on Nordic curls? I like Nordic curls a lot, but I think they need to be placed properly in your programming. So Nordic curls, I would never do if I was trying to have a phase or a block where I'm trying to jump as high as possible. Unless you're doing super low rep. But Nordic curls tend to be very eccentric focused. You're going slow on the way down. A lot of people can't even do the full concentric back up, so they're using their hands to help them back up. So I like Nordics a lot in a volume phase, right? If you're trying to do more volume, you're trying to really stress the body to force adaptation. I really like Nordics a lot, but then I would probably switch that exercise. So if I'm going to do a month, let's say, of like 4 to 6 weeks of a volume phase, I would personally keep Nordics in there, and then I would deload. And then if I'm going to do 4 to 6 weeks of a back off phase or super high intensity with low volume, I'd probably take Nordics out. And at that point, you could put in some barbell RDLs with lighter weight, moving them explosively. You could even put in hip thrusts in that position, because hip thrusts, when you think about it, barbell hip thrusts, it is mainly concentric. It's the opposite of Nordics. So Nordics, we're doing a real slow eccentric, and then most people can't even do the concentric back up. Some people can, but you're doing the concentric back up using your hands maybe a little bit. But barbell hip thrusts, we are doing, we're using all our power and our strength to do the concentric of the barbell hip thrust, but then the eccentric, we don't normally focus on lowering that weight slowly. Most people doing barbell hip thrusts, they kind of let that weight fall down kind of quickly. So it's a concentric focus movement, which would be very beneficial and very helpful in a phase where you're trying to jump your highest, where you're trying to back off from all of the eccentric work. So those are my thoughts on Nordics. I really love them. It's a tough exercise, but I do think it belongs in your programming. I would just take it out if you're trying to have a phase where you're trying to feel really bouncy, or keep it at low rep. And then the last one, what do I think about power cleans? I see you don't use them much in your training, while someone like Isaiah Rivera preaches power clean and clean pulls for vertical jump. There's a lot of coaches that preach power cleans, and there's a lot of coaches that preach that you don't need to do power cleans. I would say that, not that I don't care, but I agree with both sides of the story. I'm a very big fan of John Evans and Isaiah Rivera. I'm a big fan of Will Rattel. If you don't know who Will Rattel is, he's the hoss of all hosses. Just search Will Rattel on YouTube. This motherfucker is strong, and he loves power cleans. But then you look at someone like PGF Performance or Jump Science, and they make the argument of why they don't use power cleans. And normally the argument is that technique is a big factor in power cleans. And a lot of people, instead of teaching the technique for power cleans, you could just do high pulls, trap bar hang high pulls, or trap bar high pulls, and you could get a similar stimulus to power cleans. Now, I think both sides are right. I think it's, if you're a coach or an athlete. So if you're an athlete and you're not good at power cleans, you have two options. Get really good at power cleans and perfect the technique of power cleans so that you can reap all of the rewards from the power cleans, or just do high pulls. So as a stimulus, I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference when it comes to vertical jump. But it's if you're going to keep a shitty technique for power cleans, I would say just do high pulls. If you're going to perfect the technique for power cleans, then learn that and then do power cleans. And I think you will get more from your hang cleans and your power cleans, your squat cleans in general, if you perfect the technique. Now, Will Rattel, and I don't want to butcher his words, but he makes the argument that by doing power cleans, you are, and I don't want to butcher this, but you are working with and creating propulsion and interacting with an external body of mass, which can be great for a lot of different sport athletes. When it comes to vertical jump, I think I would have to learn more on this topic, right? I do not have a background in Olympic lifts. So usually it's the coaches who don't have a background in Olympic lifting who are against Olympic lifting, which is not the case for PGF Performance and Jump Science, which is why I respect their opinions a lot, because PGF Performance does have a background in Olympic lifting and he still doesn't use it for his athletes. And then Jump Science, I'm not really sure if he does have a background in Olympic lifting, but normally it's the people who haven't had a background in Olympic lifting who are like, oh, you don't need to Olympic lift. And then it's the athletes who do have a background in Olympic lifting who think that Olympic lifting is above all else. I like to think that I am in the middle, where I don't have a background in Olympic lifting, but I don't want to jump on the bandwagon just because I haven't had a lot of experience with it. I don't want to just say, well, it's not the best thing that you can do, and be biased in that regard. So I have nothing wrong with an athlete doing Olympic lifting or power cleans or hang cleans. I think that it's obviously gotten Isaiah Rivera a ton of results. Will Rattel is, I think he's 5'10" and 230 pounds and jacked to his gills and still dunking a basketball. I think Olympic lifts have obviously done something for him. So what do I think about the power clean? I think that I just don't know enough on that topic. I don't have a background, like I've been saying, in Olympic lifting. I've never studied it enough. But maybe this is something that I should get into. I actually know a coach who has multiple records and could teach me. I actually reached out to him to teach me the Olympic lifts, and then I never followed through with it. because I'm a loser. Anyways, that is what I think. This video, I don't want to yap too much, but that's what I think. You can do power cleans. You can do just a regular high pull. But if you are going to do the cleans, make sure that you learn the technique. Just don't be doing shitty technique. Because I just don't think that's as beneficial with your crappy technique, where you're not even catching yourself under the bar. You're kind of like lifting. I don't know. Just I'm done with this topic. I'm done with this video. Hopefully you got something out of it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment, jump for a free bodyweight vertical jump training program, and leave your question down below if you want me to answer your question in a video just like this. Peace.